Good evening, everyone. I take the opportunity to thank you for joining us this evening as we discuss the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training's diagnostic assessments. Now, I know that we are starting a little later than we had stated in the correspondence, but for those who were here around 6 p.m., I indicated that there were a number of persons who were trying to get home first and then to get on. And I believe that now we have enough persons online that we could begin the meeting. So I thank you again for being here. Now, this evening, we will spend some time discussing the diagnostic assessments. The agenda is as follows. We'll be talking about the rationale for the diagnostic test. We will discuss the content, the administration, the data collection and analysis, and finally, the way forward. Now, many of you would have heard the minister yesterday evening as she spoke about the reason for the diagnostic assessments. Since COVID-19, the impact on education has been great. And when I talk about impact, I'm talking about the negative impact. We know that there was limited social interaction. The students were relying a lot on the computers for their learning. And we also considered the fact that many teachers were trying to learn new modes of teaching using the technology. And that combination did not make it easy at all for our students, far less our teachers. And after some period of monitoring, I remember in September 2021, and again in September 2022, we urged teachers and principals to conduct diagnostic assessments before they even begin to teach the syllabus. And that was important because, as usual, teachers will try to determine where their children are to then determine what kind of inputs are needed to get the children where they want them to be. But we know that with the COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted them to do that even more and to a greater degree because we understood the possible effects of COVID-19 on the COVID-19 pandemic on students' learning. And while I commend our teachers for the work that they have done in trying to close those gaps and trying to remedy the learning loss, the Ministry of Education has come to the realization that there are still some gaps that could be closed, but we needed to determine where the gaps were for each of our students. We are still very much driven by the fact that each child matters. And that really is the rationale for these diagnostic assessments. We want to know where our children are in terms of their acquisition of concepts in literacy and in numeracy. We want to know also where they are in terms of their social and emotional learning. So it is against that backdrop that we are endeavoring to conduct diagnostic assessments in the same numeracy, literacy, and social and emotional learning in order to provide intervention strategies that can help our students to reach the desired levels. Now, you'll realize that we're not only focusing on the cognitive gains, but we want to focus on the behavioral gains. Over the past year and some, We recognize that children are not necessarily where we want them to be. Children on the whole, children in general, are not where we want them to be behaviorally. And while we are seeing some negative videos on social media, and that is a snippet of what we are getting in some of our schools, there are still some children that are having difficulty expressing themselves, having difficulty sharing things like, pencils and erasers. And we could understand why that would occur, because they went through 2 years basically not having to do any of that. They were isolated, they were in front of the computer, and they were doing what they had to do. So the ministry is at this time trying to get a better understanding of where the children are in those 3 areas. Now, in terms of the assessment, as I stated before, the data that we collect will help us to determine the degree of mastery of the students at the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th form level in identified content areas. We also want to determine what their social and what their emotional needs are as well. In terms of the preparation of the scripts for the numeracy and the literacy, we engaged heads of departments across various schools in English and mathematics. And I can tell you that many discussions were had to determine the kinds of items that should be placed on those papers. And 2 panels were selected to generate the items. And we had from there papers constructed in literacy and numeracy. We then had separate panels that reviewed the scripts. Now, in terms of the social and emotional learning assessment, we reviewed a number of social and emotional learning instruments. And of course, we had to look for those instruments that were most appropriate for our context. And I know that you may have questions about the social and emotional learning and what it includes. This instrument is one that can be shared with you as parents so that you will have an idea of the kinds of questions that will be asked. But on review of the items, we realized that the items were indeed appropriate for our context, and we will share with you so that you will know exactly what the students will be asked in that particular assessment. The senior psychologist, who is an officer at the Ministry of Education, also viewed the instrument, and if she's here, she'll be able, I believe that she may be here by now, she'll be able to give you some insight into some of the questions a little later. But we are seeking to administer that test, that assessment online, and it will be supervised by the IT teacher at each secondary school. Now, back to the numeracy and the literacy in terms of the structure of the scripts. Both the numeracy and literacy papers will have 2 sections, a section A and a section B. The section A will have a multiple choice format, and an answer grid will be given to the children, and we expect the students to shade the correct response using a dark colored pencil. Section B will be more structured, and we expect the students to write their answers in the space provided. And the responses can either be written in pencil or in pen. And I want to share with you parents at this time that your children or students don't have to necessarily revise for this test. This is a diagnostic test. It is similar to what the criterion reference is, which is, just to determine where our children are in terms of achieving the targets. So they don't have to sit down and revise now for the English or for the math. We just want to know what they understand and what they are able to do so that we can provide the requisite intervention strategies to help your children to reach their potential. We are proposing an administration for next week. You would have received a letter that stated that it was scheduled for tomorrow. But after consideration, we decided to postpone the assessment until next week. I want to remind you also that the test is not a speed test. So we will allow students to have adequate time to complete the paper, because as I said before, we want to know what they know. In terms of the schedule, we had proposed having the mathematics in the morning, or to test the numeracy in the morning, and having the English in the afternoon, or to test the literacy in the afternoon. The social and emotional learning instrument will not be administered next week. We are looking to administer that at a later date. But as I said, of course, we can share that one with you so you will have an idea of the kinds of questions that will be asked. In terms of the organization of the school and organization of the assessment, for example, the arrangement of the classroom, the supervision, and so on, the principals are already on board and they will be responsible for organizing the assessment. The scripts will be collected on the evening after the assessment, and they will be stored at the Ministry of Education, just as the criterion reference tests are stored. And then from there, we will ensure that we have the marking occurring with the teachers. We expect the teachers to engage in the marking exercise as well, so that we can get the results and share those results with the school and, of course, with you parents. We are looking forward to each school being provided with a detailed report of the performance of each student, plus a summary school report. And we believe that this information will be very useful for the principal. It will be useful for the parent, for the student, and for the Ministry of Education proper. It will help us to know exactly the degree of learning loss that has occurred over the years. And from there, we will be able to make informed decisions. We will also have a copy of the overall national report. We will share that national report with the schools as well, and we will post it so that persons can go online and see how Barbados is performing. So the meeting, as I said, is not expected to be a long one in terms of my presentation. I just wanted to use the opportunity to share with you what we are looking to do with regard to moving the children from where they are now to where we want them to be in terms of their development. And I spoke about numeracy, literacy, and social and emotional learning. Those are the three areas that we will focus on for now. But of course, in the coming terms, we will have to focus on other areas to see how best we can intervene to help our children reach their desired learning targets. So at this time, I am going to open the floor. I have with me here Mrs. Joy Adamson, who's the Deputy Chief Education Officer, Schools. I have an education officer who's responsible for the literacy component, Mrs. Gloria Haynes. And I'm sure that some other education officers will join us shortly so that we can have a full discussion relative to the diagnostic assessments which we are seeking to conduct to help our students. So I'm going to ask you to feel free to use the webinar chat to ask any questions that you may have, or to use the YouTube facility to post your questions. Thank you very much. Mrs. Adamson, I will turn over to you.
Yes, good afternoon all. Joy Adamson. If we have some questions already in the chat and in the question and answer area. The first question is, must the name of the student be written on the paper?
Yes, you would have to know the name of the student because we are providing assistance in terms of helping the student to reach his or her learning targets. And the only way that we can do that effectively is if we know who the student is. So it's similar to the criterion reference test, where children write their names on the paper, they submit the paper and corrected, and the children are given the feedback. So yes, the children's names will have to be on the paper.
Okay. We have another question. How do you propose to assess the social and emotional development learning? I know you said that earlier. Actually, that was Ms. Raffet Wharton. She'll be joining shortly, but I think that you've answered that question already in terms of a separate assessment. Also, what type of remediation would be implemented once this assessment is completed or evaluated? It's the second question. What type of remediation will be implemented?
Well, thank you for that question. Now, we can only determine the degree of remediation after collecting the data. We can only determine the exact type of remediation after collecting the said data. But as an educator for many years, I can tell you that we can focus on supplemental learning for the child, where the child can, of course, go home and engage in home study, where the parents can assist, as well as sharing the information with the teacher and giving the teacher certain resources that he or she can use in the classroom to help that children, to help those children reach their full potential. So I can't tell you specifically what will be used for each child, but I can tell you that we have open educational resources that we are currently curating for second, third, and fourth formers, because we do know that some of our children will have deficits. It may be that some of our children may not be able to read at the desired level. And if that's the case, we will have to now find other mechanisms, put persons in place, to with that specialty to assist those children. Maybe we can group those children. You can either group them and have a specialist assist them in a class, or you can have mixed ability classes with more than one teacher lending assistance in the area so that the child can understand the content. But that I think that's an excellent question, but I can answer it by saying that the reason we are doing the test is so we can see specifically how we can help each child move forward by providing the resources for the teacher and by providing the resources for the student.
Okay, thank you. Another excellent question. Will students be given their marks and access to the corrected papers so that they may learn from the exercise?
There should not be any issue with giving the child the mark or giving the child the paper. That is how children learn best. And I think even the parents should be able to see the papers, because parents, we're depending on you to help us as well. I want us to, those of you who are thinking that education is for the school environment, I want us to really understand that as parents, we have a responsibility as well to make sure that we reinforce whatever is taught in the classroom. And I'm not talking about what is taught in terms of the science or the mathematics or the English, not that only, but whatever is taught in terms of behaviors and respect. So you are a huge part of this, and we encourage your support through and through.
Okay, another question. Is there a time frame set for all of this to be completed? I assume they mean all of the assessments.
Yes, there's a time frame. We are looking at conducting the diagnostic assessments for numeracy and literacy next week. So that data will be collected next week. We will look to conduct the social and emotional learning about 2 weeks after that. So that data will be collected at that time. After that, it will take about, I'm trying to remember the exact date that was given to me by my senior education officer, but I remember him saying June. I do remember him saying by June we should have something. But what I can do in correspondence that I send out to you next week, I can put that information in there so that you will know when we can look for the results.
Okay, thank you, Chief. The question was asked if this is tomorrow, and I think that you would have just alluded to the fact that it is not tomorrow. The assessments will not be done tomorrow. The next question that we have, will the exam be for every single child? And I think that if that person would have missed, we're saying every child in second,
third, and fourth form. Yes, second, third, and fourth form. We also know, and that's a good question because some persons may have come in late. So that's good. So the assessment focuses on second, third, and fourth formers. We know also that there are children who have special educational needs, and we have assessments planned for those children as well, because they are very much part of our education system, and we will not leave them out. So that assessment is currently being finalized. So you will hear more about that in the coming weeks as well.
Okay. So that would answer the next question, which was how are you going to assess a child who has a reading deficiency? So I think that would be one of those special students that we'll be looking at. Will each parent be given their child's individual performance report?
Yes, that information will be shared with the school, and the school will share the information with the parents. Remember, the aim is for you as parents and for the teachers and for the Ministry of Education to have an understanding of how each child performs. So that information will be shared with you as parents.
Okay, let me go to the YouTube now. Some questions that we have here. If a child is absent on the day these tests are administered, what are the options?
Right. Well, if a child is absent, then we can give the child an alternative day to do the assessment or to write the test. That is the case with many of our tests, whether it be Criterion or BSSCE. We understand that things can happen on the day, but remember, we want to measure each child's ability. So the aim will be to make sure that provision is made to measure that child's ability, even though he's absent on the day of the general or the national test. Okay.
Another question, has the idea of summer school been considered?
Yes, the Ministry of Education currently offers summer school for those class 4 students who are not performing at the required standard. So that is something that we offer every summer. Certainly, if we see based on the test that students are not at that particular standard that they're supposed to be at, then summer school is an additional summer school or expansion of the summer school will be an option. So all of those things can be considered and will be considered when we get the results from the diagnostic assessments. So thank you for that suggestion.
Continuing from YouTube, we have, how frequently will the diagnostic assessment be administered?
Right. Well, we are doing this one for now. As I said earlier, we will be looking to do some other diagnostic assessments in other areas. In terms of when we will offer this type of diagnostic test again, we will sit at the table and we will further discuss among ourselves the frequency, but we have not determined the frequency at this stage.
I'm joining these two questions and comments together, Chief. Is this social and emotional test the same one as the controversial one from last year, which wasn't a social and emotional test, but that is one. And then a comment in the chat, having the bad experience from the IDB mess, how can we be assured that the ministry is being upfront with us now?
Yes, well, we are being upfront with you. We are having this meeting just so that we can discuss, so you can ask these questions. We can tell you exactly what will be going on. I shared with you that if you want to see the social and emotional learning test, in fact, we will share that test with you also so that you will see what will be administered. If you want to show it to your child, you feel free to do that. But we want the child to come in and to sit down, look at the questions and answer the questions to his or her, the best of his or her ability. It is about helping the children. And concerning that question that asked whether it's the same test as the test in October, most definitely not. It is not the same test.
Okay. Are these assessments compulsory?
Well, we are asking for your full participation for the benefit of your child. But if you think that if you're thinking that you do not want your child to participate in the assessment, you will just say so. You can indicate, but what I'm saying to you is the tests, the assessments are to aid your children so that we can better cater to their needs.
Okay. What are you using as a reference for the mathematics and English comparison? Historical data for Barbados?
No, we are looking at the national curriculum, or I should say we have looked at the national curriculum. There are certain targets set out. The heads of department met and they discussed where their students are in each of the subject areas. And from there, the paper was developed. So we're looking at the national curriculum. It is based on the expertise and experience of the heads of department in literacy and numeracy, or in English and mathematics. And those persons who are experts also in social and emotional learning.
Okay. I'm not too sure about this question, but it says, will the school change depending on the marks? I am not too sure if Taria could expand on that, Chief. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. The person is on the panel?
No, the person is in the attendee. This is in the webinar chat.
The person is probably asking whether the school will change its approach to teaching and learning, or possibly if the image of the school may change. I don't know. Maybe I could try to answer both. But in terms of if the school will change, we expect the teachers and the principal to work together with the parent to help the student So you're asking whether there will be change. The Ministry of Education will also be working along with the teachers and the principal to make sure that there is change. We need to see positive outcomes when it comes to education in Barbados. We need to see enhanced learning outcomes. With regard to if the school will change, if you mean change in terms of its perception, in terms of its image, I believe with the approach that everybody is in it together and that we have the student at the center and we're focusing on him or her, a possible change will come about. So I hope I've answered your question.
Okay. On the YouTube, we have persons wanting to know if we're linking this assessment to the end of year examinations relative to promoting students. I think it needs to be clear that is in the diagnostic.
No, this assessment is not for placement. This is not for placement. It is a diagnostic assessment, which means that we're using it to understand where our children are, what they call falling down, where they're having difficulty, where they're struggling. If we give the paper dealing with literacy to little John and John gets 0 on the paper, we want to find out why it is that John is getting 0. Or if we find that John is falling down in a particular content area, then the teacher would know, well, look, I could see that John doesn't really understand nouns. He doesn't understand adjectives. So we can spend some time with that particular area, giving him some individualized work to bring him up to standard. So that's what we're using the test to do. That's what we're using the assessment to do. Yes, and if you find that it's a whole class where children are having problems with one particular area, it may be that certain resources are needed to help the children understand, because the teacher may be doing his or her best, as they often do, to teach a particular concept, but they may not have the resources. Or it may be that the teacher himself or herself might need some more professional development, and maybe we can suggest that and provide opportunities for the teacher to professionally develop. So diagnostic, meaning that we're trying to find out what's wrong so that we can remedy it.
Okay, another question, will the same test be given to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th forms? And I think I could answer that for you, Chief. No, that there are different levels based on the curriculum. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Another question, who will be correcting these assessments?
Right. So in terms of the literacy and the numeracy, we will have teachers, we're going to ask teachers to assist with the correction of those assessments. In terms of the social and emotional learning, as I shared with you, we are looking for that to be done online. So the result will be generated at the end of the assessment.
Okay. And Ms. Braffett Wharton has joined us, but I'll let her settle and ask this next question. Very good question. Some of these students have already obtained CSEC level certification in these 2 subjects. Are they still required to take this test? If so, why?
Yes. Children who have received CSEC level certification. And I think I understand where this person is coming from. You're probably thinking that they've done CSEC, they've gotten back English at a grade 1. Why does my child have to do the test? Now, because a child has received a grade 1, it does not mean that the child doesn't have deficits. A child can get a grade 1, but the child may have deficits in a particular area. So it is still important for the child to write the test so that we can address those deficits. While we would want to say that, a grade 1 shows a certain level of proficiency, but it doesn't mean that you're perfect at everything. So let us help the child to be at his or her fullest.
And Chief, I want to say that that might be few children and hopefully not a lot of children that will have that situation. Well, I hope that the principal does not suspend students during this testing period.
Pardon? What is that? I didn't hear that.
Sorry, it was a comment. Sorry, it was a comment where one person is stating, I hope that the principal does not suspend students during this testing period. I think that we need to stress is one day that we're actually looking at. Hopefully we won't have any suspensions during that time for the students. Just make sure you tell your students to be on their best behavior and do all the right things. Okay, next question. Is the testing learning disability for high performing students? They may benefit from diagnostic testing. Is the testing learning disability? I think all students will be doing the exam, so I don't think that we are selecting any particular group of students to do the testing.
Yeah, all children at second, third, and fourth form levels across public schools in Barbados will do the assessment, right? And we don't, parents, I don't want you to see it as an exam that these children are preparing for. It is just for us to understand what they know. So they do not have to revise for it. They do not have to revise for it. We don't want the children to feel pressured. Please don't pressure the children. Let them come to school as a normal day and do the assessment to the best of his or her ability. Let the child do the assessment to the best of his or her ability, but please don't pressure the children, please.
Right. I think that answers the next question that I see here. Why was notification to parents so short? Because it's not a test, is an assessment, diagnostic assessment. So we don't want, as the chief just said, pressure. I have a question. What is the nature in terms of the structure of the exam? Objective test, short answer, essay?
Right. So, and this will allow us to recap. So we said that we will have a section A and a section B. We will have multiple choice in the section A, and in the section B, we will have short answer.
Again, I think that we would have alluded to the fact that it's an assessment, so it should not interrupt the children studying in terms of preparation for the exams coming up in a couple of weeks. After the assessment, will the children get corrective measures in the school with corrective measures within the school time frame? I assume they meant a short time frame. So as we said earlier, we're aiming to get the results back in June, and then we will try to see how we could get that remediation.
Right. Yeah, I think that person may be asking about the intervention strategies, whether the intervention strategies will bring about a change in the short time frame. But note that having intervention strategies to help students is better than having none at all. So it's better to know where the children are so that we can pinpoint and address those deficits. And that is better than nothing at all.
Okay. We have a parent who's asking if they will be able to see the papers beforehand. And I think that we said only for the social and emotional learning aspect. And I think this is a good segue, Chief, into Ms. Brathwaite-Wharton sharing information about the social and emotional learning assessment tool we'll be using.
Yes. So Mrs. Brathwaite-Wharton, there were some questions about the social and emotional learning tool. Could you please give an idea of some of the items that will come on that social and emotional learning tool? Mrs. Brathwaite-Wharton, if you're speaking, I'm not hearing you.
Still muted.
Yeah, I'm not hearing her.
Okay. Until she comes in, After the data has been compiled from the assessment, okay, how long after will it take to correct or improve? I think we've answered that question already.
Yes.
Weaknesses. Okay. So we said that the test is not going to be used for the promotion exams, for the end of term exams. And we will share the social and emotional script. Why weren't the results from end of term 2 exams, which were administered in school, used to assist with diagnosing the issues the children have?
The question is why weren't the exams?
Why did the schools not use the results from end of term 2 exams that would have been administered at the schools to assist with diagnosing the issues that the children have? So we are doing a national diagnosis.
Yeah, but I want to make it clear to the parents, and I think that's a good question. I want to make it clear to the parents that every day when teachers go in to teach, they diagnose, right? Or they should diagnose. Before they begin to teach content, they should find out what their students know and what they're able to do. And then delve into filling the gaps. That happens. Teachers usually do that on an everyday basis. At the ending of the term, within a particular school, children don't usually do exams in term 2. They don't. They just do assessments. They do tests. They might do a portfolio. They might do a project. They do, if you're in full form, you might do SPAs. You might do experiments and those kinds of things. So you don't have exams coming on to the end of term 2. You have exams usually in term 3. Now, what is different about this assessment is that this is a national diagnostic assessment. So we are looking at the performance of the students across the board. It's what we call a standardized assessment. So it isn't about what is happening at school A, and the children in school A, they're doing this and this is what they are, this is where they are. Or a case of what is happening in school B, the students, at school B, they're doing this and this is where they are. We want to look across the schools to see what the levels of proficiency are based on a standard, right? So that information will be exceedingly useful for the teachers, the principals, the parents, the Ministry of Education, because you will not only see your child's performance at his school or based on what his school is offering, but you will see the child's performance based on a national standard, based on, you can even break it down and look at it in zones. You can see how the child is performing generally. So I thought that's an excellent question. That was an excellent question because it allowed me to fully explain why we are really doing this. But it isn't that diagnostic assessments aren't happening. They're happening every day in schools.
Okay, Ms. Prophet was having some issues with her computer. Her camera's not working, but she's available to respond now, Chief, as it relates to items on the social and emotional learning. Ms. Prophet? I'm not hearing you. I see that you've unmuted, but I'm not hearing you.
While she's trying to get on, Mrs. Adamson, there's a question here that I see. The question is why only these age levels and not first, fifth, or sixth form levels as well, when all children were impacted by COVID, if you say this is your reasoning for the assessment. Are you seeing that one? As one is in the webinar chat. Not hearing you, Mrs. Adams.
Sorry, I'm going down the list, so you're probably more to the bottom.
Oh, sorry, I skipped. Oh, sorry. Sorry for that. Okay. But while I'm at it, allow me to answer. And again, these are very, very good questions because I will ask the same question. We would like to have national diagnostic assessments across the board. National diagnostic assessments across the board. But to do national diagnostic assessments from nursery all the way up to fifth form, secondary, that concept is not a realistic one, given our manpower, given our resources. So we identified 3 levels: the second, the third, and the fourth form, because for us, those levels were exceedingly concerning. It doesn't mean that we will not, this does not mean that we will not expand to other levels or incorporate the primary school. It doesn't mean that at all. But for now, we are focusing on the second, the third, and the fourth. We didn't say fifth form because fifth form, those children will be writing the CSEC and they will soon be exiting. So even if we do the diagnosis, there isn't much intervention that we can do at that level. First form, those children are now coming in. They're now getting settled. You know, they're now getting a feel for a secondary school. So we said, you know, let's focus on the second, the third, and the fourth for now. But if we had the resources and we had the manpower, if I'm telling you, we would do the national diagnostic assessment across primary, secondary, all the way through, because we want to know exactly where our children are to the standard. But rest assured that the teachers within the schools, and I want to reiterate this, I can't say it enough, they are conducting diagnostic assessments as well. And they are doing their best to address the deficits that they see every single day, even the social and emotional deficits, even the behavioral problems, you know, the behavioral problems that many of our teachers face every day, and they try their best to deal with those and still teach the nation's children. Thank you, Mrs. Adamson.
All right, testing, Ms. Braffett. She's trying another form. Not the sound. Okay, continue the questions. Chief, please confirm who has access to the data, the results for both the literacy and the SEL test.
Right, so for the numeracy and the literacy, the Ministry of Education will have control of those results. There was a question asked about who will be marking. The teachers will be marking. It'll be similar to the criterion reference test. For the social and emotional learning, we will also own that data. It will be done online. We will own that data. So I want Juanita Brathwaite Wharton.
Yeah, I just heard a sound.
Oh, goodness. Okay, good.
So, this is a senior psychologist, Juanita Brathwaite Wharton. Yeah, so Mrs. Brathwaite Wharton, I was asking the question about, could you share with the parents a sample of the questions that will be asked on the social and emotional learning test? There were some questions about those.
Right. So the social and emotional learning test assesses 5 subscales of social and emotional learning. It looks at the area of self-awareness, if the child is aware of themselves, how they behave, how they operate, and so on. Self-management, if they're able to manage their own behaviors, if they're able to operate socially, functionally when they're angry, say, for example. It looks at relationship skills, responsible decision making, and emotional behavior concerns. So the test is called the SEL Brief and Mental Health Skills. And we're not just looking at the social emotional skills, but we want to see the impact of the children's mental health having survived the the COVID-19 pandemic and all that ensued, the online learning, etc., etc. We want to be able to, one, identify the strengths and weaknesses in this whole area of social and emotional learning and mental health. But we also want to get an idea across schools, where are the areas where our students are having challenges, so that we could provide interventions to meet the needs. And so counselors at the secondary school, for example, if you recognize across the second forms, a number of children are having issues with managing anger, well, then you would want to cater your lessons, especially in the health and family life education class, to try to share anger management tips. If, for example, there is a difficulty with relationship skills, and we know because the children are more using the technology than having face-to-face conversations and so on, this may have impacted their ability to operate normally within relationships with their peers, with their parents, with teachers, whoever. And so if you recognize that, let's say, for example, I'm just calling, let's say the Alexandra School, we recognize that our third and fourth formers are having an issue with the relationship skills. Well, then the team at the school, the counseling support team, will want to put things in place through the HFLE lessons, or if they have to provide group support for the children so they can help them build those skills. With the mental health aspect of it, what we want to be able to see is if there are students who are exhibiting maladaptive behaviors that need to have further intervention. So the test is online, as she said earlier. It will be scored online. And then we're going to get a report on each child that would have taken that test. So it will give us information that we can follow up on if needs be. And then there's going to be a school report. So you will have a report on every individual child that has done the test. And yes, parents can have access to see how their child has functioned. And then you're going to have a school-wide report, which will tell you, okay, this is how the second formers perform, this is how the third formers, this is how the fourth formers perform. Overall, these are the areas of deficits in your school, so that we can look to see how we can address these.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Brathwaite Wharton.
You're welcome.
Okay. Earlier, a question about opting out of doing the assessments. One person wanted to know if they could opt out from just the CL assessment. I think the chief would have answered that earlier, that we would want you to encourage everybody to do assessments so we know where we're at. And when do you, okay, that's the same questions. Right, the person said apologies, already answered. If the children are being diagnosed every day, why are the children still doing so poorly and the teachers don't contact the parents to collaborate to see what can be done for the child? We have to wait on an end of term report. That was a comment made, Chief, in the chat.
Well, you shouldn't have to wait on an end of term report. I know that many schools have parent-teacher meetings and conferences, and sometimes these conferences are poorly attended by parents. That is a perfect opportunity for you to find out how your child is doing in school, not only in terms of the academics, but in terms of the behavior. And if you're unable to make that conference, then, you know, you can always reach out to the teacher. But I agree with you that sometimes teachers can indeed make contact with parents a little earlier. But I do understand, I know that you do understand as well, that sometimes given the number of things that teachers have to do during a particular day, they may not be able to contact you at the same time. But as parents, you're supposed to be monitoring as well. So that if you see anything strange happening with your child, if you realize that your child, you know, he's a certain age or she's a certain age, and there are certain things that he or she isn't doing, then, you know, you can make contact with the principal and ask for a conference with the teacher. Feel free to do that. There's no rule saying that you can't reach out to the school. but I advise you to make use as well of the parent-teacher conferences. You don't have to wait until the ending of the term.
Okay, Chief. Why is this test being administered in the third term rather than the first term if its purpose is diagnostic? Will the interventions be implemented in time to help the students?
Yeah, the interventions will be implemented in time. The data will be collected, the analysis will be done, and the report will be given to the parent, the student, the teacher, the school. So the learning doesn't stop at the ending of term 3. It continues in term 1 of the following year with a different teacher. So that information will be at the school for the principals and the teachers to use. It can help principals with the grouping of the children. So it is about using the information to be more effective and to be more efficient in our operations. I know that, some parents may be a little concerned about the fact that you're having these diagnostic assessments and that, in terms of the interventions, are these interventions going to prevent my child from getting the proper education that he or she is supposed to get? No. The interventions are to help the child get an even better education. When children sit in the class and they begin the class lost, as you could say lost, and the teacher is teaching and talking and talking and talking, that child doesn't understand anything in the class, not for the entire 40 minutes. And then it's compounded. If that child does nothing, no self-regulated learning, if that child does not go home to say, well, I didn't understand what the teacher said in class today, so let me go home and read. If that child does not do that, and the child goes back into the class, the child goes back in more loss. And if the teacher just teaches, then you can see how the problem is compounded over a period of time. So the diagnostic assessment is to help the teacher to be more effective in his or her teaching. It's to help the student. It's to help you. If you know that your child has a problem with forming sentences, you can spend some time helping your child to form these sentences, yes, in second form or third form or full form. If you realize that your child has a problem with adjectives and nouns, and someone might say, but my child goes to one of the high-flying schools, he can't have any problems with adjectives or nouns, but you will be surprised. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. So it is just to help. It is to help us to be more effective and to be more efficient with what we do.
Okay. I forgot if I asked this question yes, we did answer it. And question here, will the schools, whose responsibility will it be? The parent's responsibility, the ministry, the school, to ensure that the child receives the remedial assistance required?
Sorry, it will be everybody's responsibility. And that is what I want us all to know and to understand. Everybody's responsibility. Okay. The school, the ministry, the parent, everybody's responsibility.
Okay. Question, just a clarification, Chief. It's been brought to my attention by one of our officers that no names will be on the paper. The candidate numbers will be used as for the 11+ and CSEC examinations. So they'll be able to trace through the candidate number.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that correction.
Okay.
Thank you for that correction.
Another question. You mentioned that numeracy and literacy assessments will be administered next week, but no days or dates were given.
Right. We are proposing Wednesday next week for that assessment, for those assessments. But I said that correspondence will come, confirming the date.
Another question, what benchmarks have been used to develop the social and emotional assessment And I think Ms. Braffett-Wharton can tell you that this is a known tool. So it's not something that we created. And she would have shared the name. So Ms. Braffett-Wharton, would you want to repeat that so that persons, if they want to do any research?
Yeah, so the 5 areas that I spoke to with regards to social and emotional learning, those are the areas that, based on wide research on student behaviors and so on, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsibility, decision-making, those are well-researched areas of social and emotional learning, interpersonal skills, and behavioral functioning of students. So it is not something that we have done. It is something that is researched and used widespread in other jurisdictions. Let me just say that this would be our first time doing a full screener on social and emotional learning, but school from time to time through the HFLE classes would screen where students are performing so that they can gear their lessons to suit. However, in other jurisdictions, as part of the mental health programming in schools, social and emotional screening is done every year. It is part of the school programming where every year children are assessed and then they put programs in place to ensure that whatever needs or deficits are dealt with. Not just from, on a one-time basis, but continuously.
Okay, thank you for that. Will there be a follow-up review? Will there be a follow-up review to determine if the intervention was effective?
Most certainly. Monitoring and evaluation is important for any project. So we will monitor and evaluate. We will continue. We have education officers who often go into schools at the secondary level, and they will go in to see whether we are reaping the results that we want to reap after conducting the diagnostic assessment, collecting the results, and engaging in the intervention.
Comment here, Chief. You be pleased. The person says, I wish this intervention was done years ago. I really appreciate it. So that's something that you can note.
You're welcome, sir.
Right. So a breakdown of the paper in terms of the English. I don't know if Ms. Haynes, education officer responsible for literacy, will want to expand on that. She's here. Exactly section A and section B of the English paper. Haynes?
No problem. Good evening to everyone. Welcome. And I would like to say that the English paper is an English paper. Section A is multiple choice, the usual grammar and mechanics. Section B, we have some vocabulary, comprehension or free response, and we have written expression. And these concepts are familiar to every English student. So there's nothing to fear. Absolutely nothing to fear. There's no need to opt out of an English paper. No need to opt out of it. Okay, so simple English exam, not exam, sorry, an English assessment. So have no fear. We've got your back.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Haynes. I think that is one of the things that we have to continue stress. It's not a test. It's not an exam. It's an assessment. Therefore, we just want to see how the children are doing. If we have a question, I assume that this is based on what happened last year. Will the children be asked questions like if they wish to change their gender and engage in sex in the social, emotional learning assessment? I'm unclear as to what this assessment comprises.
Right. So it will have no questions like that. So you do not have to worry about that. Juanita Brathwaite-Wharton, are you able to give an example or a few examples of the kinds of questions that will be on the paper? I'm not hearing. Juanita Rapid-Wharton?
Yes, I'm here, Chief. Unfortunately, I'm not
Right.
able to give an example because my computer is not working. I'm actually using my daughter's computer. But we do have it. I can give you off the top of my head, but this would probably not be exactly what it looks like. Like questions that ask, like if you are in a situation where there's a problem, like what's, are you aware, because it's a multiple choice question, are you always aware of how you would respond? Or if something happens, you're very upset about it, like are you able to manage your temper? Those kinds of things, which I just said off the top of my head because it's not the exact thing. I don't have my computer or use of my computer at this time.
Right. So
there are no
what
intrusive questions. There are no intrusive questions. That it is mostly about the children's ability to employ social skills, behavioral skills. And as people know, we have had quite some concerns raised about our children's behavior, especially coming out of COVID, a lot of fighting and questions raised about bullying and so on in schools. So it's to get a sense of what are the deficits that the children present with that cause them not to be able to manage simple problems in a socially acceptable way. What are the challenges of them, being able to manage situations that may cause one to become upset, but in a way in which is nonviolent. That's really the kind of information we're trying to seek. How, what does the child feel about themselves, their competencies, their abilities, and so on? No intrusive questions in terms of personal data that sometimes can be asked in some psychological tests. This is just about your social and emotional skills.
And remember, we said that we will share it with you, so you will have an idea of what will be on the assessment. So you have nothing to fear there.
Okay, is there a special pencil to be used for the multiple choice?
We didn't say the type of pencil, but we want that when the child shades, that it can be seen. So a dark colored pen, a dark pencil.
Okay. Can a child refuse to do the exam if they're uncomfortable with questions, or will it be victimized? I think that we shouldn't have any uncomfortable questions, and for sure they will not be victimized. People up in arms and stuff in the primary school. Okay. As the previous question asks, why no at this time? I think we kind of addressed that already, because this term persons are focusing on exams. I don't think we need to go back. You are assuming that every parent has the skills to assist their child. What little skill you have. I know some persons will say that you can assist however you can, in whatever way you can, and the school will be there to support you. I'm not too sure, has the SSIS-SEL brief and mental health been piloted in Barbados? Something with this social and emotional learning. I assume this is what you're talking about that Ms. Braffett would have been referring to. There's no need to pilot it because it is a renowned assessment and we're not piloting. Are the assessments only being done in secondary school at this time? Yes. Some full form students are being asked to assist with CXC exams and will not be at their respective schools. Revision be given for those. This comment was made. I'm not too sure. Gerard or somebody would, or I don't know if this person, Mr. Roger Taylor, could identify which school and which CXC exam will be happening next Wednesday. I'm not aware, Chief.
I am not aware either. I am not aware either.
If Mr. Taylor, yeah.
Yes, he can private message and let us know which schools so that we can investigate and have arrangements put in place for the children to do the assessment.
Okay. All right. I see no more questions in the webinar chat, and we have addressed most of the questions that I am receiving from the YouTube chat. This time we've addressed most of them. They're really focusing on what the test is about, if it is compulsory, and what are the contents of the SEL. I don't know if you can make a call if there are any more questions, queries, concerns.
There is a Mr. Graves saying that we missed his questions. Are you seeing that?
Okay, so many questions.
Mr. Graves.
Mr. Graves, given the principal is in charge of the school and the teachers of the class, how can the ministry ensure that the students will benefit from this testing?
Read the question for me again, Mrs. Anderson.
Sorry. Given that the principal is in charge of the school and the teacher in charge of the class, how can the ministry ensure that the students will benefit from this testing? It's not a test, assessment, but
an assessment, yes. And the ministry has general oversight. I can tell you that the principals across the secondary schools, across the primary schools too, work very closely with the ministry. We have regular meetings to discuss matters that are affecting the education of our children, and we talk about ways that we could improve the education system. Now, that's with regard to meetings, but we also have from the Ministry of Education oversight by going into the schools. We have education officers who go in regularly and observe the teaching learning environment. They observe the management of the school, the instructional leadership, all of those things. So it will be a case of the Ministry of Education continuing to work closely with the principals and the teachers, because the principals will work closely with the teachers too, to get the desired result.
I think we would have answered this other question. How will you manage to address the children's shortcomings while maintaining continuous education? We're addressing them as we go on. The other question that Mr. Graves had, if there's one test for all second, third, and full forms, all schools, please explain how will the difference between the high performing schools, as he indicates, he named some schools, and we don't like to differentiate CQC and St. Michael's. Can you compare that with St. George and Princess Margaret?
So you are looking at the overall performance, I believe. Mm-hmm. Remember that these tests are constructed in a way that we can identify the areas of deficiency. And while you're mentioning those schools, certain schools, what I can tell you is that some of those children will have deficiencies. Will have deficiencies in certain areas. So it is important for us to get an understanding of where these deficiencies are so that we can provide the support, whatever form that support takes. So we will not sit here as a ministry and say, well, let's just give this test, or not this test, let's just give this assessment to certain students and not others, or certain students at certain schools and not others, because it means that we'll be making the assumption that certain children at certain schools don't have any deficiencies and that they need no diagnosis. And that is very erroneous. This is the reason that we are doing it, or conducting these assessments across all schools, because the data may reveal something very different to what you are implying in your question.
Okay. And we have a question here. Which are the priority as frequently stated concerns the child, their competency levels, and requisite intervention strategies to address the student deficits? Can we be assured that at the teacher level, the relevant analyses are also made of teaching deficits and that they could also be addressed? Data gathered from this exercise should also be used to ascertain whether there are any deficits in the teaching and learning strategies.
Right, so the focus right now is on the student. The data, as I mentioned earlier, may reveal that students may have difficulty with particular concepts across the board in a particular classroom. And if that is so, then we will do some more investigation and provide the support where necessary. It may be that the teacher may be having difficulty teaching the concept. And that is where Earlison Teachers Training College now can come on board to help us to develop workshops that can help teachers in a particular area. You know, as teachers, we have our favorite areas to teach, and then there are other areas that you teach, but you may not be as proficient in that area. But with time and with experience and with professional development, those, you know, it becomes easier. So the data will be used to, as I said, to provide the supports where necessary, whatever forms that support takes.
Okay. Please inform how you will assess those with learning disabilities. I think you would have answered that earlier, but being a parent of a child, intervention is needed. How will you assess those with learning disabilities?
Right. So I don't see Miss Sargent here. Mrs. Bradford Wharton, could you take that one?
Yes, Chief. So the tool that's going to be used to assess the students with learning disabilities is called the Wide Range Achievement Test, WRAT, and it looks at 3 areas: numeracy skills, literacy skills in terms of reading of words, and spelling skills. That's a test that a lot of psychologists use. The short-term version of the test that a lot of psychologists use to assess whether a child has academic deficits, learning challenges. It will give an idea of where they are functioning in the area of numeracy, at what age level they are functioning. Are they 14 but functioning like a 7-year-old? Are they functioning maybe like a 16-year-old in the area of numeracy? But then let's say in the area of reading, they are functioning below level. You know, that's how we diagnose dyslexia, when you are on par with the math and other skills, but you're below par with the reading, the spelling, and so on. So the test that's used is a RAT. We call it the RAT, but to be clear, it is Wide Range Achievement Test. And again, there's lots of information on both this one and the SIS that persons can go and Google on their own to gather as much information as they can on what it is that we will be doing and the kinds of questions that there are.
Thank you, Ms. Bradford Wharton. These diagnostic tests have any impact on determining the levels our children are at and where children will be placed in the future in our secondary schools, middle schools, etc., if or when the current 11+ exams come to an end? And I think we said not. If I don't know,
we answered that. It's a resounding no. It is to diagnose. It is not to place.
Okay. Would parents be able to get a copy of the student's assessment if requested in order to help in addressing? And we said yes to that previously. Okay. I don't see any more questions.
Okay.
So
All
I don't know
right.
if you want to recap.
Yes. So I want to thank you, parents, for all of the questions that you asked. It was our pleasure at the Ministry of Education to engage with you so that you can ask the questions and be given the assurances. I will just recap. Today, during our meeting, we discussed the rationale for the diagnostic test. We discussed the content, administration, data collection and analysis, and the way forward. We spoke about the fact that we are seeking to administer the assessments next week. We are proposing Wednesday, but a letter will come stating exactly the date that the assessments will be administered. We are proposing the assessment of the literacy in the, just a moment, make sure that I'm telling you the right thing in terms of the timing for the literacy. The literacy in the PM and the numeracy in the morning. We said that the social and emotional learning instrument will be administered at a later date, and we will inform you of that. In terms of the mathematics and the English, that will be done. Section A, we will have Section A and Section B. The names will not be on the paper. The candidate number will be on the paper. But of course, we would still be able at our level to trace the name to the candidate number so that we can have the proper interventions for the particular students. We said that we will be able to share the social and emotional learning instrument with you so that you will see what kinds of questions your children will be asked. In terms of data collection and analysis, we assured you that we will own the data, we will have that data, and we told you what we will do with it in terms of the intervention. Somebody asked about the kinds of intervention that we will have. I spoke about provision of resources and professional development opportunities for teachers. We spoke about the fact that we need all hands on deck. So the results that we get will not only inform the teachers and the principals, it will inform the parents as well. Because in as much as children learn in the classroom, we need your support as parents when they get home. We need you to make sure that they do their homework. I know that some of you may not be able to help the children to the degree or help your child to the degree that you would wish, but your support, and sometimes just even sitting with them and allowing them to read to you, or sitting with them and making sure that they do their homework and they do their review, and something as simple as learning tables in second form or third form. You as a parent, you can help the child in that way just by being there to support their educational journey. Parents, we're all in this together, and it is really about providing the best environment, MENTS, for our children at home and at school so that they can grow up to be the kinds of citizens that we want them to be. Citizens who are respectful, citizens who can contribute to our national development, citizens who can contribute to our future. So thanks again, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. And I look forward to more of these kinds of conversations with you. Do have a wonderful evening.